I won 50 million in the lottery, but asked for $10 for medicine. They laughed. Aren't you tired of being a failure? Get a job, my Dill yelled. I just smiled, waiting for this moment. When she saw a limousine and 3 black SUVs waiting for me, she screamed, I'm glad to have you here. Follow my story until the end and comment the city you're watching from, so I can see how far my story has reached. My name is Anita. I'm 67 years old, and today I discovered exactly what my family thinks of me. It wasn't a surprise, really. Deep down, I'd known for years. But knowing something and having it thrown in your face are two very different things. I stood in Damon's kitchen this morning, my arthritic fingers wrapped around an empty prescription bottle. The label read clearly, heart medication, refill needed, $10. That's all I needed. 10 measly dollars to keep my heart beating regularly for another month. Damon? I called softly, not wanting to wake the children. It was barely 7 in the morning, but I knew my son would be up, getting ready for his job at the insurance company. Could I speak with you for a moment? He emerged from the hallway, already dressed in his pressed shirt and tie, phone glued to his ear as usual. Without looking at me, he held up one finger, the universal sign for wait. One I'd been waiting for his attention for 3 years now, ever since I moved into this house after my small apartment became too expensive on my $800 monthly pension. Yeah, Dave, I'll get those numbers to you by noon, he said into the phone, finally meeting my eyes with an expression of mild annoyance. What is it, Mom? I held up the empty bottle, my voice barely above a whisper. I need to refill my heart medication. It's $10. I'm sorry to ask, but my pension doesn't come until next week, and I used the last of my savings for groceries yesterday. Damon's expression didn't change. No concern, no immediate offer to help. Just that same look of inconvenience I'd grown accustomed to. Before he could respond, Kalia's voice cut through the morning quiet like a blade. Are you kidding me right now? She appeared in the kitchen doorway, her blonde hair perfectly styled despite the early hour, wearing a silk robe that probably cost more than my entire monthly income. Anita, we've talked about this. You can't keep asking us for money every time you need something. My heart, the one that needed those $10 pills, clenched painfully in my chest. It's just $10, Kalia, for my medication. Just $10? She laughed, but there was no humor in it. Yesterday it was money for groceries. Last week it was money for a doctor's appointment. Where does it end? I looked at my son, hoping he would defend me, remind his wife that I wasn't asking for luxury items or frivolous purchases. I was asking for medication to keep me alive. But Damon just stood there, scrolling through his phone, letting his wife handle what he clearly saw as an inconvenience. Maybe it's time you found a job, Kalia continued, her voice getting sharper. You're 67, not 97. Plenty of people your age work. Walmart is always hiring greeters. The suggestion hit me like a physical slap. After raising Damon alone from the time his father died when he was 5, after working double shifts as a seamstress to put food on the table and keep him in decent clothes, after sacrificing every dream I'd ever had to make sure he had opportunities I never did, she was suggesting I should be a Walmart greeter to afford my heart medication. Kalia, I said quietly, my voice steady despite the storm raging inside me. I worked for 47 years. I raised your husband single-handedly after his father died in that construction accident. I think I've earned the right to retire. Oh, here we go with the sob story again. She rolled her eyes dramatically. Yes, Anita, we all know you were a single mother. But that doesn't mean we owe you anything for the rest of your life. Damon turned out fine despite your circumstances. Despite my circumstances, as if being widowed at 25 with a 5-year-old child was some moral failing on my part. Tyler and Emma, my 7- and 9-year-old grandchildren, crept into the kitchen in their pajamas, drawn by the raised voices. Emma's eyes were wide with confusion as she looked between the adults, sensing the tension even if she didn't understand it. What's wrong, Grandma Anita? Emma whispered, coming to stand beside me. Before I could answer, Kalia scooped her up, her voice sweet as poison. "Nothing's wrong, sweetheart. Grandma just needs to learn to be more independent. Maybe she'll find a job so she can buy her own things instead of always asking Mommy and Daddy for money." The words were directed at Emma, but they were meant for me. A public humiliation delivered through my own granddaughter. I watched as Tyler backed away, uncomfortable with the tension, and my heart broke a little more. That's when I felt it. The slight weight of the folded paper in my cardigan pocket. The lottery ticket I'd bought 3 months ago with my late husband Robert's birthday numbers. The ticket I'd checked online yesterday morning while everyone was still sleeping. The ticket that had changed everything, even though nobody knew it yet. $50 million. That's what that little slip of paper was worth. $50 million that I'd won 3 months ago and hadn't told a single soul about. $50 million that could buy all the heart medication I'd ever need, plus a mansion, plus a new car, plus everything my family clearly thought I was too poor and pathetic to afford. But I hadn't told them. Instead, I'd decided to conduct a test. A simple test to see who my family really was when they thought I had nothing to offer them. Would they help their 67-year-old mother and grandmother buy $10 worth of medication to keep her heart beating? Or would they make her feel like a burden for asking? The answer was becoming crystal clear. I looked at Kalia, standing there in her expensive robe, holding my granddaughter while explaining to a 9-year-old why Grandma was essentially a freeloader. I looked at Damon, my son, the boy I'd sacrificed everything for, now a man who couldn't even be bothered to look up from his phone while his wife humiliated his mother. For 3 months, I'd been documenting everything. Every cruel comment, every eye roll, every time they made me feel small and worthless. I'd been meeting with lawyers, making arrangements, planning for this moment. Because somewhere in my heart, I'd known it would come to this. "You know what?" I said softly, reaching into my pocket and pulling out my old flip phone. "You're absolutely right, Kalia. I need to be more independent." I dialed a number I'd memorized weeks ago. The phone rang twice before a professional voice answered. "Good morning, Mrs. Henderson. Are you ready?" Kalia frowned, clearly confused by my sudden phone call. Damon finally looked up from his device, perhaps sensing something had shifted in the room's atmosphere. "Yes," I said into the phone, my voice steady and calm. "Please bring the cars around. It's time." I hung up and slipped the phone back into my pocket. For the first time in months, I smiled. Really smiled. "What was that about?" Damon asked, a note of suspicion creeping into his voice. "Oh, nothing important," I replied, moving toward the living room window. "I'm just making arrangements to become more independent, like Kalia suggested." Outside, the quiet suburban street began to change. First, one black SUV appeared, sliding silently to the curb in front of the house. Then another, then a third. And finally, a pristine white limousine pulled up behind them, so long it nearly blocked the neighbor's driveway. Kalia's coffee mug slipped from her hand, shattering against the kitchen tile. What the hell is going on? I turned to face my family. My son who couldn't spare $10 for his mother's heart medication. My daughter-in-law who thought I should be grateful for the privilege of living in their spare room. My grandchildren who were learning that elderly people are burdens to be tolerated rather than treasures to be cherished. "I'll tell you what's going on," I said, my voice carrying a strength I hadn't felt in years. "For 3 months I've been testing all of you. Testing to see who you really are when you think I have nothing to offer." The sound of car doors closing echoed from outside. Professional footsteps approached the front door. "And you know what I discovered?" I continued, watching as Kalia's face drained of color. "I discovered that my own family would rather see me humiliated than spend $10 to keep me alive." The doorbell rang, deep and resonant. Through the window, I could see men in expensive suits waiting patiently on the porch. I walked toward the front door, pausing to look back at my family one last time. Damon's mouth was opening and closing like a fish out of water. Kalia had gone completely pale. The children were pressed against the window, staring in amazement at the convoy of luxury vehicles. "The test is over," I said quietly. "And you all failed." Then I opened the door to greet my new life, leaving behind the people who had proven they never truly loved me at all. 3 months earlier, I was still the same invisible woman living in my son's spare bedroom, counting every penny of my $800 pension and pretending I didn't notice the eye rolls when I asked for help with groceries. But everything changed on March 15th, Robert's birthday. He would have been 73 that day. I'd taken the bus downtown, something I did every year on his birthday, to visit the little diner where we'd had our first date 45 years ago. It was a tradition Damon didn't know about, something private between me and the memory of the only man who ever truly loved me. The diner was different now, new owners, new menu, new everything. But I ordered Robert's favorite, coffee with 2 sugars and a slice of apple pie. "You celebrating something special today, honey?" asked the waitress, a kind woman about my age with graying hair and tired eyes. "My late husband's birthday," I told her, stirring the coffee slowly. "We would have been married 48 years this December." She smiled warmly. "That's beautiful. He's watching over you, I bet." After finishing my coffee, I stopped at the corner store to buy my weekly groceries with the $40 I'd carefully budgeted from my pension. That's when I saw the lottery billboard across the street. Mega Millions jackpot, $57 million. The numbers seemed to glow in the afternoon sunlight. I don't know what possessed me to buy that ticket. I'd never been a gambling woman. Robert and I could never afford such luxuries when he was alive, and certainly not after he died. But standing there in that store, holding the $5 bill that was supposed to buy me a small container of milk, I heard Robert's voice as clearly as if he were standing beside me. "Go ahead, Nita. Take a chance." I used his birthday numbers, the same ones I'd memorized decades ago. 04121957, April 12th, 1957, the day we met at that church social when I was barely 20 years old. For 3 days, I carried that ticket in my wallet, forgetting about it completely. Then, on Monday morning, while Kalia was at her yoga class and Damon was at work, I decided to check it online using the old laptop he'd given me for staying connected. My hands shook so badly I could barely type the numbers into the website. Match, match, match. All 6 numbers matched perfectly. $57 million. After taxes, roughly $36 million. More money than I could spend in 10 lifetimes. More money than Damon would make in his entire career. More money than Kalia spent on her weekly shopping trips. I stared at that screen for nearly an hour, convinced I'd made a mistake. But the numbers didn't change. 04121957. Robert's birthday. Our anniversary. The date that changed both our lives, and now, 45 years later, had changed mine again. My first instinct was to run to Damon, to share the incredible news, to celebrate together as a family. But something stopped me. Maybe it was the memory of last week's argument about the grocery money. Maybe it was the way Kalia had sighed dramatically when I'd asked for help buying new reading glasses. Or maybe it was the growing realization that my son and his wife saw me as nothing more than an expensive burden they were stuck with. So instead of celebrating, I sat in that spare bedroom and made a decision that would change everything. I was going to test them. For 3 months, I would continue living as I had been, dependent on their grudging charity, asking for small amounts of money for necessities, watching their reactions to my requests. I would document everything. Every cruel comment, every impatient sigh, every moment they made me feel like a burden. And then, when I had enough evidence of their true character, I would decide what to do next. The first call I made was to Peterson, Phillips and Associates, the most prestigious law firm in the city. I'd seen their commercials during my sleepless nights, advertising their services for complex estate planning and wealth management. When I told them I'd recently come into a substantial inheritance and needed complete discretion, they didn't ask questions. Money, I was learning, bought silence as much as it bought anything else. Harold Peterson himself met with me that first Tuesday, in his corner office overlooking the river. He was a distinguished man in his 60s, with silver hair and the kind of expensive suit I'd only seen in magazines. "Mrs. Henderson," he said, reviewing my lottery documentation with professional calm, "this is quite a substantial windfall. Have you considered the tax implications?" "I understand there will be significant taxes," I replied, sitting straighter in the leather chair than I had in months. "But even after taxes, this amount will completely change my circumstances." "Indeed it will. Now, you mentioned wanting to keep this confidential for the time being?" "My family doesn't know," I explained carefully. "I'd like to observe their behavior toward me before making any decisions about sharing this information." Harold raised an eyebrow but nodded professionally. "That's not uncommon, actually. Sudden wealth can complicate family relationships. We can certainly maintain complete confidentiality while we establish your accounts and plan your strategy." Over the next weeks, I learned things I'd never imagined. How to set up offshore accounts, how to purchase real estate through shell companies, how to hire private investigators to conduct background checks on family members. Harold's team was thorough and discreet, and soon I had a complete picture of my family's finances. Damon made $93,000 a year at the insurance company. Good money, though not enough to support Kalia's expensive tastes. She'd racked up nearly $47,000 in credit card debt buying designer clothes and spa treatments. They had a second mortgage on the house and were perpetually behind on payments for her BMW and his truck. They were struggling financially, which explained some of their resentment about supporting me. But it didn't explain the cruelty, the constant humiliation, the way they made me feel worthless for existing. "Mrs. Henderson," said Patricia Mills, the private investigator Harold had recommended during our second meeting. "I've completed the background checks you requested. Your daughter-in-law has quite an interesting social media presence." She showed me printouts from Kalia's Facebook and Instagram accounts, posts I'd never seen because I wasn't tech-savvy enough to understand social media, according to her. The posts were devastating. Photos of expensive dinners with captions like, "Finally got rid of the extra mouth to feed for the evening." Pictures of home renovations with comments like, "Would have been done months ago if we didn't have certain unexpected expenses." A group photo from Tyler's birthday party where I'd been cropped out, with the caption, "Perfect family day, just the four of us." But the worst was a post from just 2 weeks ago, a photo of her new designer purse with the caption, "Treating myself because I deserve it after dealing with ungrateful people who think the world owes them everything. Some people never learn that nothing in life is free." The post had 37 likes and 12 comments, all from her friends agreeing about how generous she was and how some people take advantage of family. I was the ungrateful person. I was the one taking advantage. I was the nothing is free lesson she was teaching her social media followers. "There's more," Patricia continued gently. "I'm afraid your son has been participating in some of these conversations as well." She showed me screenshots of text messages between Damon and his sister Lisa, who lived 3 states away. Messages where my son complained about Mom's constant demands and wondered how much longer we're going to be stuck with this situation. He'd even told Lisa that I was getting worse and that they were considering assisted living options because I was becoming too much to handle. Too much to handle. Their 67-year-old mother who asked for help buying groceries and heart medication was too much to handle. I thanked Patricia for her work and sat in my car in the parking garage for 20 minutes, crying harder than I had since Robert's funeral. Not because I was surprised by their cruelty, but because seeing it documented so clinically made it impossible to pretend it wasn't happening. That night, I made my second major decision. I wouldn't just test them, I would give them every opportunity to prove me wrong. I would ask for smaller amounts, be more grateful, cause less inconvenience. I would bend over backwards to be the perfect, unobtrusive houseguest. And if they still treated me with contempt, I would know with absolute certainty that their cruelty wasn't about money or stress or circumstances. It would be about who they really were. For the next 2 months, I watched and documented everything. The way Kalia served everyone else dinner and left me to fend for myself. The way Damon changed the subject when I mentioned doctor's appointments or medication refills. The way they spoke about me when they thought I couldn't hear, using words like burden and freeloader and ungrateful. Meanwhile, Harold's team was busy preparing for my new life. They purchased a beautiful home in Riverside Heights, the most exclusive neighborhood in the city, using a shell company to maintain my anonymity. They hired a staff, a housekeeper named Maria who reminded me of my own mother, a driver named James who treated me with more respect in our first conversation than my own family had shown me in years, and a personal assistant named Rebecca who helped coordinate everything from grocery deliveries to medical appointments. They also helped me plan my exit strategy, the fleet of cars that would arrive at Damon's house, the professionally prepared statements explaining my decision, the new bank accounts that would ensure I never again had to ask anyone for $10 for heart medication. As I lay in that narrow bed in their spare room last night, listening to Kalia and Damon argue about money in the next room, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years. Anticipation. Tomorrow would be the final test. Tomorrow, I would ask for $10 for my heart medication and see how my family responded. If they helped me with kindness and compassion, I would reconsider everything. I would share my winnings, forgive their past cruelties, and try to rebuild our relationship on better terms. But if they humiliated me, made me feel worthless, treated me like a burden for needing medication to keep my heart beating, well, then I would know exactly who they really were. And I would act accordingly. The lottery ticket was still in my pocket, worn soft from months of handling. Tomorrow, that little piece of paper would change everything. Tomorrow, the test would be complete. And tomorrow, I would finally be free. The men in suits filled my son's living room like they owned it, which, given my new circumstances, I suppose I could have bought it outright if I'd wanted to. Harold Peterson stood near the fireplace, his silver hair catching the morning light, while two associates flanked him with briefcases that probably cost more than Damon's monthly salary. James, my new driver, waited respectfully by the front door, his crisp uniform and professional demeanor making him look like he belonged in a completely different world than this modest suburban home. Kalia had retreated to the kitchen corner, clutching Emma so tightly the poor child squirmed uncomfortably. Tyler had pressed himself against the window, staring wide-eyed at the convoy of luxury vehicles that had transformed their quiet street into something out of a movie. Neighbors were beginning to emerge from their houses, phones in hand, obviously filming the spectacle unfolding in front of the Henderson residence. But it was Damon's face that held my attention. My son stood frozen in the center of his own living room, mouth slightly agape, eyes darting between the professional strangers and me as if trying to solve an impossible puzzle. The phone he'd been glued to all morning hung limply in his hand, forgotten. "Mrs. Henderson," Harold said, his voice carrying the kind of authority that comes with charging $500 an hour. "Are you ready to proceed with the arrangements we discussed?" "Yes," I replied, surprised by how steady my own voice sounded. "I believe it's time my family learned the truth." "What truth?" Damon finally found his voice, though it came out as barely more than a whisper. "Mom, what is this? Who are these people? Why are there limousines outside my house?" I looked at my son, this man I'd raised single-handedly from the age of 5, worked double shifts to put through college, sacrificed every dream and comfort to ensure he had opportunities I never did. The same man who, 30 minutes ago, couldn't spare $10 to keep his mother's heart beating regularly. 3 months ago, I began, settling into the armchair that Kalia usually claimed as her own, I won the lottery. The silence that followed was so complete I could hear the grandfather clock ticking in the hallway. Even Emma stopped squirming, sensing the weight of what had just been revealed. "You what?" Kalia's voice was barely audible. "I won the Mega Millions jackpot on March 15th, I continued, watching as the color drained from both their faces. $57 million. After taxes, roughly $36 million. "That's impossible," Damon stammered, shaking his head as if he could make my words disappear. You don't even play the lottery. You always said gambling was a waste of money. I bought one ticket, I explained calmly, using your father's birthday numbers. The same numbers we used for everything important, our anniversary, your birthday party planning, even the combination to our first safe. 0412195-7. Harold stepped forward, opening one of his briefcases with practiced efficiency. Mrs. Henderson has been our client for 3 months now. We've been handling all aspects of her financial transition during this observation period. Observation period? Kalia's voice cracked on the words. I met her eyes directly for the first time in months without looking away. I wanted to see who you really were when you thought I had nothing to offer. I wanted to test whether your treatment of me was about genuine financial strain or something much uglier. This is insane. Damon ran his hands through his hair, a nervous habit he'd had since childhood. You're telling me you've been sitting on $36 million while asking us for grocery money? I'm telling you that I've been documenting every cruel comment, every eye roll, every moment you made me feel worthless for existing. My voice remained calm, but I could feel decades of suppressed hurt bubbling just beneath the surface. This morning was simply the final test. Kalia suddenly released Emma and stepped forward, her expression shifting from shock to something that looked almost predatory. Anita, if you've really won this money, then obviously we need to sit down as a family and discuss how to manage it responsibly. This is wonderful news. We can pay off the house, get Tyler into that private school we've been considering, maybe take that family vacation to Europe we've always talked about. The speed with which she pivoted from calling me a burden to making spending plans was breathtaking in its audacity. I couldn't help but smile, though there was no warmth in it. Actually, Kalia, I've already made all the financial decisions I need to make. Harold, would you please show them the documentation? Harold's associate stepped forward, placing a thick folder on the coffee table. Mrs. Henderson has purchased a home in Riverside Heights for $2.7 million. She's also established trust funds, charitable foundations, and various investment portfolios. Her affairs are completely in order. Riverside Heights? Damon's voice was barely a whisper. Mom, those houses. That's where the mayor lives, the bank president, corporate executives. Yes, I replied simply. It's where I live now, too. The reality was beginning to sink in. Tyler abandoned his post at the window and crept closer, his 7-year-old mind struggling to process what was happening. Grandma Anita, are you rich now? Before I could answer, Kalia dropped to her knees in front of my chair, her perfectly manicured hands reaching for mine. The same hands that had gestured dismissively when I'd asked for help with medication money an hour ago. Anita, I am so sorry about this morning. I was stressed about money. You know how tight things have been lately. I didn't mean any of those things I said. Family is everything to me, and you know how much we love you. I looked down at her desperate face, remembering the Facebook posts Patricia had shown me, the comments about ungrateful people and unexpected expenses, the photos where I'd been deliberately cropped out of family memories. Do I know that? I asked quietly. Because this morning you suggested I get a job as a Walmart greeter to afford my heart medication. Yesterday you complained to your friends on social media about having an extra mouth to feed. Last week you told Emma that some people never learn that nothing in life is free, while you were looking directly at me. Kalia's face went ashen. You saw my posts? I saw everything, I replied, including the text messages between Damon and Lisa about finding assisted living options because I'm becoming too much to handle. Damon's phone clattered to the floor. Mom, I can explain that. We were just exploring options for the future, not making any immediate plans. The future, I repeated, tasting the bitterness of the word. You mean the future where you dump your 67-year-old mother into the cheapest facility you can find, because she has the audacity to need medication and groceries. That's not what we meant, Damon protested, but his voice lacked conviction. We both knew exactly what those conversations had been about. Harold cleared his throat diplomatically. Mrs. Henderson, shall we proceed with the transition arrangements? Your new household staff is prepared to receive you immediately. New household staff? Kalia's voice was strangled. Maria, my housekeeper, is preparing lunch as we speak, I explained, rising from the chair with more dignity than I'd felt in years. James will be driving me home after we finish here. Rebecca, my personal assistant, has already arranged for my belongings to be collected and moved to my new residence. Your belongings? Damon looked around frantically, as if just realizing that my departure would be permanent. Mom, wait. You can't just leave. We're family. We need to talk about this like adults. We are talking about it, I replied calmly. You're learning that the woman you've spent 3 years treating like a burden is actually worth more money than you'll see in several lifetimes. And I'm learning that even when faced with that reality, your first concern isn't the pain you've caused me, but how you can benefit from my good fortune. Tyler tugged on my cardigan with small, confused hands. Grandma, are you leaving us? My heart broke a little at his innocent question. These children had been collateral damage in their parents' cruelty, taught to see their grandmother as an inconvenience rather than a treasure. But I couldn't sacrifice my dignity and peace of mind for occasional visits that came with a price tag of constant humiliation. I knelt down to Tyler's level, my arthritic knees protesting. I'm going to live in a beautiful house with a big library and a garden with flowers your grandfather would have loved. Maybe someday, when you're older, you can visit me there. What about our visits? Emma piped up, having extracted herself from her mother's grip. What about Sunday pancakes and story time? Before I could answer, Kalia was back on her feet, her desperation morphing into anger. You can't just take our children away from us. You can't buy yourself a new family and abandon your real one. I'm not taking anyone away, I replied, standing slowly. I'm simply removing myself from a situation where I'm consistently made to feel unwelcome and worthless. You made it clear this morning that I'm a burden you can barely tolerate. I'm relieving you of that burden. But we love you. Damon's voice cracked like a teenager's. Yes, we've had some financial stress lately, and maybe we haven't been as patient as we should have been, but you're my mother. You can't just disappear because of some arguments about money. Some arguments about money? I stared at him in disbelief. Damon, this morning your wife suggested I should be grateful for the privilege of living in your spare room. She made me feel like a worthless freeloader for asking for $10 to keep my heart beating. And you stood there scrolling through your phone while she humiliated me. I was distracted, he protested weakly. You've been distracted for 3 years, I replied. Distracted while your wife gradually erased me from family photos. Distracted while she complained about me on social media. Distracted while your children learned to see their grandmother as a burden rather than a blessing. Harold stepped forward again, his professional calm a stark contrast to the emotional chaos surrounding us. Mrs. Henderson, we should begin the transition. You have a 2 o'clock appointment with the financial advisor, and the interior designer is meeting us at 3. I nodded, then turned back to my family one final time. For 3 months, I gave you every opportunity to show me love, kindness, and basic human decency. Instead, you showed me who you really are. I won't forget that lesson. As I walked toward the door, Kalia's voice followed me, high and desperate. You're going to regret this. Family is forever, Anita. Money can't buy you love. I paused with my hand on the doorknob, James waiting patiently to escort me to my new life. You're right about one thing, Kalia, I said without turning around. Money can't buy love. But apparently, the lack of it can reveal who never loved you in the first place. Then I stepped outside into the sunshine, leaving behind the people who had proven that blood means nothing when the heart has turned cold. The first call came at 6:30 that evening, just as Maria was serving dinner on my new dining room table. The mahogany surface gleamed under the crystal chandelier, and fresh orchids from my garden sat in a Waterford vase that cost more than my old monthly pension. I glanced at the caller ID on my new phone, Damon, and let it ring until voicemail picked up. My new house was everything I'd dreamed of during those long nights lying in that narrow bed in their spare room. Riverside Heights sat on a hill overlooking the city, where the air smelled like roses instead of disappointment. The master bedroom had a walk-in closet bigger than the entire room I'd been assigned at Damon's house, and the library had floor-to-ceiling windows that let in streams of golden afternoon light. "Mrs. Henderson," Maria said softly, placing a perfectly prepared salmon dinner in front of me. "Should I answer the house phone if it rings? It's been going off every few minutes." "Let them all go to voicemail, please," I replied, cutting into the fish with genuine appetite for the first time in months. "I'm not ready for conversations yet." Maria nodded respectfully. She was perhaps 50 years old, with kind eyes and gentle hands that reminded me of my own mother. When Harold's team had interviewed household staff, I'd insisted on people who understood what it meant to be dismissed and overlooked. Maria had spent 10 years caring for an elderly woman whose family visited twice a year and complained constantly about the expense. She understood my situation perfectly. The house phone rang again as I was finishing dinner. Through the dining room windows, I could see the lights of the city twinkling below like fallen stars. Somewhere down there, in their mortgaged house with its second-hand furniture and mounting debt, my son and his wife were probably having the conversation of their lives. I'd seen the missed calls adding up on my phone. Damon, Kalia, even Lisa calling from 3 states away, probably after Damon had filled her in on the morning's revelations. 17 calls in 6 hours. 17 attempts to reach the woman they'd spent 3 years treating like a burden. James appeared in the doorway, still wearing his professional uniform despite being off duty. "Mrs. Henderson, there's a vehicle parked outside the front gate. It appears to be your son's truck." I set down my fork and walked to the front window. Sure enough, Damon's beat-up Ford pickup was idling outside the ornate iron gates that secured my new property. I could see his silhouette in the driver's seat, probably working up the courage to press the intercom button. "Should I speak with him?" James asked diplomatically. "Not yet," I replied. "Let him sit there and think about what he wants to say." 3 months of planning taught me the value of patience. The truck remained there for 47 minutes. I watched from various windows as Damon occasionally got out, paced near the gates, returned to his vehicle. Once he approached the intercom panel, but walked away without pressing anything. Finally, as full darkness settled over the city, he drove away. But he came back the next morning at 8:15 sharp. This time he brought reinforcements. Kalia sat in the passenger seat, and I could see 2 small shapes in the back, Tyler and Emma, probably confused about why they were sitting outside a mansion instead of being driven to school. The intercom buzzer finally sounded at 8:30. Maria looked at me questioningly from across the breakfast room where I was reading the morning paper, a luxury I'd never had time for when every day was spent worrying about grocery money and whether I was too much of an inconvenience to ask for help with basic necessities. "I'll take it," I said, walking to the security panel near the front door. Damon's voice crackled through the speaker, tight with exhaustion and desperation. "Mom, please. We need to talk. The kids are asking for you." I looked through the monitor at my grandchildren's faces pressed against the truck's rear windows. Tyler was holding a drawing he'd probably made for me. Emma had tears streaking down her cheeks. They didn't understand why Grandma had disappeared, why their parents were acting strange, why everyone kept whispering about money. For a moment, my resolve wavered. These children hadn't chosen their parents' cruelty. They'd been innocent victims of the toxic environment Kalia had created and Damon had enabled. But then I remembered Emma's confused face yesterday when Kalia had explained that Grandma needed to learn independence. I remembered Tyler backing away when his mother had used his presence to deliver a public humiliation. These children were already learning that elderly people were burdens, that love came with conditions, that respect had to be earned through financial contribution. "Tell them I love them," I said into the intercom, "but tell them this conversation is between adults." Mom, please. Damon's voice broke. I know we made mistakes. I know we hurt you. But you're my mother. We can fix this. Can you? I asked. Can you fix 3 years of making me feel worthless? Can you fix the Facebook post where your wife called me an ungrateful freeloader? Can you fix the text messages where you told Lisa I was becoming too much to handle? Silence stretched across the intercom. In the background, I could hear Kalia's voice, urgent and coaching. Tell her we're sorry. Tell her we love her. Tell her family comes first. I can hear her, Damon, I said quietly. Even now, she's trying to script your words instead of letting you speak from your heart. That's not, he started, then stopped. Mom, I'm sorry. We're both sorry. We were stressed about money, and we took it out on you, and that was wrong. But we're family. Family forgives each other. Family also treats each other with basic dignity and respect, I replied. When was the last time you asked how I was feeling? When was the last time you included me in a family decision? When was the last time you made me feel like I mattered for reasons other than what I could provide? Another long silence. Then Kalia's voice came through the speaker, having apparently grabbed the intercom from Damon. Anita, I know you're angry, and you have every right to be. I was horrible to you this week, and I'm sorry. But think about Tyler and Emma. Think about what you're doing to them by cutting yourself off from the family. The manipulation was breathtaking in its audacity. After years of teaching those children to see me as a burden, she was now using them as emotional leverage to guilt me into returning to my role as their family ATM. I am thinking about them, I replied calmly. I'm thinking about what kind of adults they'll become if they grow up watching their grandmother be treated like a second-class citizen. I'm thinking about what they'll learn about love and respect from watching your example. You're being selfish! Kalia's facade cracked, revealing the anger underneath. You're punishing innocent children because you're mad about money. This was never about money, I said, my voice carrying a strength I'd forgotten I possessed. This was about discovering who you really are when you think someone has nothing to offer you. You showed me exactly who you are, Kalia. Both of you did. I could hear Tyler crying in the background, probably not understanding the adult conversation but sensing the tension and sadness. It broke my heart, but it also strengthened my resolve. These children deserved better role models than parents who treated elderly family members as disposable burdens. Please, Damon's voice returned to the intercom, raw with desperation. Just let us come in and talk face to face. Let us try to make this right. I looked around my beautiful new home, at Maria preparing fresh coffee in the kitchen, at James polishing the silver that would never be hidden away because guests might think it was showing off. This was my sanctuary, my place of peace and dignity. I would not allow the people who had destroyed my sense of worth to contaminate this space with their guilt and manipulation. I need time, I said finally. Time to process what the last 3 years have taught me about our relationship. Time to decide whether there's anything left to salvage. How much time? Damon asked quickly, as if afraid I might change my mind. I don't know, I answered honestly. Maybe weeks, maybe months, maybe forever. Forever? Kalia's voice was shrill with panic. You can't mean that. You can't just abandon your family forever. I didn't abandon anyone, I replied quietly. I simply stopped accepting unacceptable treatment. There's a difference. Through the monitor, I watched Damon's shoulders slump in defeat. Kalia was gesticulating frantically, probably still trying to strategize their next approach. But Tyler had pressed his small face against the window, holding up his drawing like a flag of surrender. I love you all, I said into the intercom, my voice softer now. But love isn't enough to heal the damage that's been done. Love without respect is just empty words. I turned off the intercom system and walked away from the monitor, leaving them sitting outside the gates of a life they'd never imagined I could achieve. Through the dining room windows, I watched their truck disappear down the winding road that led back to their world of mortgage payments and credit card debt, and the growing realization that they'd lost something irreplaceable. The phone calls continued throughout the day. Voice messages filled with apologies, promises, and increasingly desperate attempts to find the right words to undo years of wrong treatment. By evening, there were 23 new messages waiting on my voicemail. I didn't listen to any of them. Instead, I sat in my new library with a cup of Earl Grey tea, reading a book I'd been wanting to read for months, but never had time for when every day was consumed with walking on eggshells and asking permission for basic necessities. Outside my window, the city lights sparkled like possibilities, and for the first time in 3 years, I felt completely at peace. Tomorrow, Damon would probably return, and the day after that. Eventually, he might bring Lisa or other relatives to plead his case. They might cry, promise to change, swear that things would be different. But I'd learned something valuable during those 3 months of secret observation. People don't change their fundamental character. They might modify their behavior temporarily when circumstances force them to. But their core beliefs about respect and dignity and the value of other human beings don't shift overnight. Kalia had spent 3 years teaching her children that their grandmother was a burden. Damon had spent 3 years allowing it to happen. They'd both proven that their love was conditional on my financial dependence and their perception of me as powerless. Now I had all the power, and their love was suddenly abundant and overflowing. The irony was as clear as the Waterford crystal catching moonlight on my dining room table. But it was too late for ironies to heal the wounds they'd carved into my heart. Some damage once done couldn't be undone by simply saying the right words or promising to do better. As I climbed the curved staircase to my master bedroom, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years. Hope for tomorrow. Not hope for reconciliation with people who'd proven their character, but hope for a future where I could live with dignity, surrounded by people who valued me for who I was, rather than what I could provide. It was a different kind of family I was building now, a chosen family of respect and genuine care. And it was exactly what I deserved. 2 weeks after I'd settled into my new life, the harassment escalated beyond simple phone calls and gate visits. It started with Lisa showing up unannounced, having driven 8 hours from Colorado to stage what she probably imagined would be a heartwarming family intervention. Rebecca, my personal assistant, buzzed the intercom at 2:30 on a Tuesday afternoon to inform me that a woman claiming to be my daughter was at the gate, demanding to speak with me about family obligations. I watched through the security monitor as Lisa paced outside my gates, her face flushed with righteous indignation. She'd always been the family peacemaker, the one who smoothed over conflicts and reminded everyone that family comes first. But she'd also been conveniently absent during the 3 years I'd lived as an unwelcome guest in her brother's home, too busy with her own life in Denver to notice how I was being treated. "Mrs. Henderson," Rebecca said diplomatically, "shall I inform her you're not receiving visitors today?" I considered it. The smart thing would be to maintain my boundaries, to refuse to engage with family members who only seemed concerned about our relationship now that they knew about my financial windfall. But part of me was curious to hear what Lisa would say, whether she would acknowledge the years of neglect or simply focus on moving forward as if nothing had happened. "Let her in," I decided. "But stay close by, please. I have a feeling this conversation won't go well." Lisa burst through my front door like a woman on a mission, her eyes wide as she took in the marble foyer, the crystal chandelier, the oil paintings that had cost more than most people's annual salaries. She'd always been the more subtle of my children, but I could see her mentally calculating the value of everything she saw. "Mom," she said, her voice a mixture of awe and accusation. "What have you done?" "I've created a life where I'm treated with dignity and respect," I replied calmly, gesturing for her to follow me into the living room, something that was apparently impossible in my previous situation. Lisa settled onto the Italian leather sofa, her fingers running over the buttery surface as if she'd never touched quality furniture before. Damon told me what happened. He said you won the lottery and just disappeared, without telling anyone, without sharing the good news with your family. I shared plenty with your brother's family, I said, taking my place in the wingback chair that had become my favorite spot for morning coffee. I shared 3 years of my life, living in their spare room while they made me feel like a burden for existing. I shared my pension money helping with groceries while they complained about having an extra mouth to feed. I shared my dignity while they discussed putting me in assisted living because I was becoming too much to handle. Lisa's face flushed red. Damon said there were misunderstandings, communication problems. He said you took some things the wrong way. Did I take the Facebook posts the wrong way? I asked, my voice remaining steady despite the anger building in my chest. The ones where Kalia called me an ungrateful person who thinks the world owes her everything? Did I misunderstand the text messages where your brother told you I was becoming a burden and you needed to help him find a facility to dump me in? Lisa's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. You saw those messages? I saw everything, I replied. For 3 months, I documented every cruel comment, every dismissive gesture, every moment they made me feel worthless. I hired investigators to show me exactly how your brother and his wife really felt about having me in their home. You hired investigators? Lisa's voice rose an octave. To spy on your own family? To gather evidence of how I was being treated, I corrected. Evidence that proved what I already knew, that I was nothing more than an expensive inconvenience they were stuck with until I had the good grace to die and stop being their problem. Lisa leaned forward, her expression shifting to the pleading tone she'd perfected as a child when she wanted something. Mom, even if things were bad, and I'm not saying they were good, but even if Damon and Kalia made mistakes, we're still family. You don't just abandon family because of some arguments. Some arguments? I stared at her in disbelief. Lisa, your brother's wife made me feel like a worthless freeloader for needing heart medication. She cropped me out of family photos. She served everyone else dinner and left me to fend for myself. She taught your nephew and niece to see their grandmother as a burden who takes advantage of other people's generosity. But you do have the money now, Lisa said, her voice taking on a desperate edge. You could help them. You could help all of us. Damon's drowning in debt. Kalia's credit cards are maxed out, and they're about to lose the house. And I've got medical bills from Sarah's surgery last year that are killing us financially. There it was, the real reason for her 8-hour drive and her sudden concern for family unity. Lisa wasn't here to heal relationships or address past wrongs. She was here because everyone needed money, and I was now the family lottery winner who could solve all their financial problems. So you think I should reward 3 years of emotional abuse by paying everyone's bills? I asked quietly. I think you should remember that we're family, Lisa shot back, her peacemaker facade finally cracking. I think you should remember that Damon raised you when Dad died. I think you should remember that we all struggled after Mom passed, but we stuck together because that's what families do. Damon didn't raise me, I said, my voice growing cold. I raised him. I worked double shifts to keep food on the table and clothes on his back. I sacrificed college, career opportunities, relationships, everything to make sure he had a chance at a better life. And this is how he repays that sacrifice, by treating me like a burden he can't wait to get rid of. Lisa's desperation was becoming more obvious by the minute. Mom, please, just think about what you're doing. You're tearing this family apart over money. Is that really what you want your legacy to be? The woman who chose wealth over family? I'm not choosing wealth over family, I replied firmly. I'm choosing dignity over abuse. There's a difference, though I understand why you might struggle to see it. Before Lisa could respond, Rebecca appeared in the doorway. Mrs. Henderson, I'm sorry to interrupt, but there are several more vehicles outside the gate. It appears your son has returned with additional family members. I walked to the front window and looked out at what could only be described as a family convoy. Damon's truck was there, along with Kalia's BMW, Lisa's rental car, and two vehicles I didn't recognize. Through the security monitor, I could see at least 8 people gathered outside my gates, including Tyler and Emma, who looked confused and tired. "They brought everyone," Lisa said, joining me at the window. "Uncle Jerry and Aunt Pat drove down from Portland. Cousin Michael came up from Sacramento. We all want to help mediate this situation." "Mediate?" I turned to stare at Lisa. "You brought the entire extended family to gang up on me? To pressure me into foregiling years of mistreatment and opening my wallet to solve everyone's financial problems?" "We brought people who love you," Lisa insisted, though her voice lacked conviction. "People who want to help rebuild our family relationships." The intercom buzzed, and Damon's voice filled the room, amplified by what sounded like a microphone or bullhorn. "Mom, we're not leaving until you talk to us. The kids are asking for their grandmother. Uncle Jerry drove 7 hours to see you. This has gone on long enough." I looked at Rebecca, who was watching the scene with the professional detachment of someone who'd probably witnessed similar family dramas in her previous employment. "Mrs. Henderson, would you like me to call security? Or the police?" The thought of having my own family arrested was both tempting and heartbreaking, but I realized this moment was exactly what I needed. A chance to speak my truth clearly and definitively, in front of witnesses who could carry the message to anyone who still didn't understand my decision. "Open the gates," I said quietly. "Let them come in. It's time to finish this." Rebecca nodded and pressed the button that swung open the ornate iron gates. Within minutes, my living room was filled with relatives I hadn't seen in years, all of them staring around my home with expressions ranging from awe to resentment to barely concealed greed. Uncle Jerry, my late husband's brother, stepped forward as the apparent family spokesman. He was a man who'd always enjoyed being the center of attention, and he clearly relished his role as mediator in what he probably saw as a dramatic family crisis. "Anita," he said in his booming voice, "we're all here because we love you, and we're concerned about what's happening to our family. Now, I understand there have been some hurt feelings and misunderstandings, but family is family. We work things out together." "Misunderstandings?" I looked around the room at faces I'd once trusted, people who'd ignored my situation for years, but were now suddenly invested in family harmony. "Jerry, did Damon tell you about the misunderstanding where his wife suggested I get a job as a Walmart greeter to afford my heart medication? Or the misunderstanding where they discussed putting me in assisted living because I was too much trouble?" Uncle Jerry's confident expression faltered slightly. "Now, Anita, I'm sure things weren't as bad as all that." "They were worse," I cut him off, my voice carrying a strength that surprised even me. "For 3 years, I lived in that house feeling like an unwelcome guest who was tolerated out of obligation. I was excluded from family decisions, cropped out of photos, and made to feel grateful for basic necessities like food and shelter." Cousin Michael stepped forward, his businessman's smile firmly in place. "Aunt Anita, we all know families have conflicts, but you've been blessed with this incredible good fortune, and now you have the opportunity to heal relationships and help people you love." "Help them how?" I asked pointedly. "By rewarding their cruelty with financial assistance? By teaching them that emotional abuse is acceptable as long as the victim eventually pays everyone's bills?" Kalia, who'd been uncharacteristically quiet since entering my home, suddenly burst into tears. "Anita, I know I made mistakes. I know I was harsh sometimes. But I was stressed about money and I didn't handle it well. Can't you find it in your heart to forgive me? Can't you think about Tyler and Emma and what this is doing to them?" I looked at my grandchildren, standing near the back of the group, clearly overwhelmed by the adult drama surrounding them. Tyler clutched his drawing, the same one he'd held up outside my gates weeks ago. Emma's eyes were red from crying. "You want me to think about Tyler and Emma?" I asked Kalia quietly. Then explain to me why you spent 3 years teaching them that their grandmother was a burden. Explain why you made them watch you treat an elderly woman with contempt and disrespect. What kind of adults do you think they'll become after learning those lessons? I never meant, Kelia started, but I held up my hand. You meant every word, I said firmly. Every cruel comment, every dismissive gesture, every moment you made me feel small and worthless. You meant all of it, and you enjoyed the power it gave you over someone you saw as helpless. The room fell silent, except for the soft sound of Emma's quiet crying. Even Uncle Jerry seemed to have run out of mediation strategies. I walked to the center of the room, looking at each face in turn. I want all of you to understand something. This isn't about money. This has never been about money. This is about the fundamental lack of respect and dignity I was shown by people who claim to love me. But we do love you. Damon's voice cracked with desperation. Mom, we do. Maybe we didn't show it well. Maybe we made mistakes. But we love you. Love isn't a feeling, Damon, I replied sadly. Love is an action. Love is treating someone with kindness when they're vulnerable. Love is including them in decisions that affect their lives. Love is making them feel valued and cherished, not tolerated and dismissed. I turned to face the entire group. For 3 months, I gave you every opportunity to show me love in action. Instead, you showed me exactly who you are when you think someone has nothing to offer you. You failed that test completely. So what now? Lisa asked, her voice barely above a whisper. You just cut us all off forever? You take your money and disappear and never speak to any of us again? I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the decision that would define the rest of my life and theirs. Now I live with dignity, I said simply. I live surrounded by people who treat me with respect and genuine affection. I live without having to apologize for existing or feeling grateful for basic human decency. I looked at Tyler and Emma one more time, their innocent faces caught in the middle of their parents' selfishness. And hopefully, I added softly, I live with the knowledge that someday, when you've learned to value people for who they are rather than what they can provide, there might be room for genuine relationships built on mutual respect. The silence that followed was complete. Finally, Uncle Jerry cleared his throat. Well, he said awkwardly, I guess that's your final decision then. Yes, I replied. It is. One by one, they filed out of my beautiful home, back to their world of financial stress and the growing realization that their lottery ticket to financial freedom had just walked away forever. I was finally completely free. 6 months have passed since that final confrontation in my living room, and I wake up each morning in a bed that belongs entirely to me, in a house where every room holds peace instead of tension. The master bedroom windows face east, catching the first light of dawn as it spills across the city below. I no longer wake up to the sound of Kalia's sharp voice complaining about bills or Damon's indifferent silence. Instead, I wake to Maria humming softly in the kitchen and the gentle sound of James washing the car in the circular driveway. My new life has a rhythm that feels both luxurious and natural. I spend mornings in my library, reading books I'd accumulated over the years, but never had time to enjoy when every day was consumed with walking on eggshells and asking permission for basic necessities. The afternoon sun streams through the tall windows as I work in my garden, planting roses that Robert would have loved, and vegetables that I'll actually be allowed to eat without feeling guilty about the grocery expense. Rebecca has become more than an assistant. She's become a friend who understands the value of quiet efficiency and genuine respect. When she schedules my doctor's appointments, she sits with me in the waiting room not because she has to, but because she wants to ensure I'm never alone during vulnerable moments. When she orders my medications, she never makes me feel like a burden for needing them. The $10 heart medication that caused such drama in my son's kitchen is now automatically delivered each month, paid for without question or commentary. But the most surprising development has been the new relationships that have formed around me. When Harold suggested I might enjoy volunteering at the senior center downtown, I initially resisted. The last thing I wanted was to be around other elderly people who might remind me of my own vulnerability. But Maria encouraged me to try it, and I discovered something unexpected. A community of people who valued my experience rather than seeing my age as a liability. Eleanor Hartwell, 73 years old and sharp as a tack, became my first real friend in decades. She'd been a high school principal for 40 years before retirement and had her own stories about family members who only called when they needed money. We spend Tuesday afternoons playing bridge with Margaret Chen, a retired nurse, and Robert Williams, a widowed professor who lost his wife to Alzheimer's 2 years ago. "The thing about our children," Eleanor said one Tuesday as we finished our third rubber of bridge, "is that they see us as their practice round for being adults. They don't think about us as real people with real feelings until something forces them to." Margaret nodded thoughtfully. "My daughter used to drop her kids off every weekend without asking if I had plans. Just assumed I was sitting around waiting to babysit. When I finally told her I'd signed up for art classes and couldn't watch them anymore, she acted like I was being selfish for having my own interests." "Did the relationship improve?" I asked, genuinely curious about whether family dynamics could change. "Eventually," Margaret replied, "but only after I stopped being available at her convenience. She had to learn to see me as a person instead of a free childcare service." These conversations helped me understand that my experience wasn't unique. Across the country, elderly parents were struggling with adult children who saw them as burdens rather than blessings, obligations rather than treasures. The difference was that I now had the resources to enforce my boundaries in ways most people couldn't. The phone calls from my family had stopped completely after that final confrontation. No more desperate voicemails, no more surprise visits, no more relatives driving across state lines to plead their case. Harold had quietly spread word through his professional network that any attempts to contest my lottery winnings or claim elder abuse would be met with swift legal action. The message was received clearly. I was not a victim to be rescued or an asset to be claimed. But last week, something unexpected arrived in my mail. A hand-drawn card from Tyler, somehow delivered despite my family not having my new address. Inside, in careful 7-year-old handwriting, was a simple message. "Dear Grandma Anita, I miss you. Love, Tyler. P.S. I remember the pancakes." I cried for 20 minutes after reading it. Not because it made me want to reconcile with his parents, but because it reminded me that innocence exists even in toxic environments, and that children remember genuine love even when it's surrounded by adult cruelty. I called Harold the next day. "I want to set up education funds for Tyler and Emma. Full college expenses, graduate school if they choose, but with one condition. The money can only be accessed if they maintain a relationship with me independent of their parents." "That's an interesting stipulation," Harold replied thoughtfully. "It ensures you'll have the opportunity to know your grandchildren as they grow up, but only if they genuinely want a relationship with you." Exactly. When they're 18, they can choose whether to know their grandmother as a real person or just see me as their parents do, as someone who disappointed them by refusing to be mistreated. Harold arranged everything through a complex trust structure that would provide the children with educational opportunities while protecting them from becoming pawns in their parents' financial desperation. When Tyler and Emma turn 16, they'll receive letters explaining their grandmother's gift and her hope that they'll choose to build genuine relationships based on mutual respect rather than financial obligation. It's a long-term investment in the possibility of love without conditions. Meanwhile, I've begun using my resources in ways that feel meaningful. The Riverside Community Senior Center now has a new wing dedicated to programs that help elderly people maintain their independence and dignity. The Robert Henderson Memorial Garden provides a beautiful space where seniors can gather without feeling like burdens to their families. I've also quietly begun helping other elderly people who find themselves in situations similar to what mine had been. Mrs. Patterson, 81 years old, was living in her nephew's basement, until I purchased a small apartment building and offered her a rent-controlled unit with dignity and privacy. Mr. Rodriguez, 74, had been sleeping on his daughter's couch until I connected him with affordable housing and home health services that allowed him to maintain his independence. These aren't grand gestures. They're simply investments in the radical idea that elderly people deserve respect and autonomy rather than grudging charity from relatives who see them as inconveniences. Last month, I received an unexpected visitor. Rebecca announced that a young woman named Sarah was at the gate, claiming to be Lisa's daughter and my granddaughter. I hadn't seen Sarah in over 5 years. She'd been away at college during most of my time living with Damon, and Lisa had never brought her around during holiday visits. I almost refused to see her, assuming this was another family attempt to manipulate me through emotional appeals. But something in Rebecca's description of the young woman's demeanor made me curious. "She seems genuinely nervous," Rebecca reported. "Not aggressive or demanding like the others. She asked if she could just talk to you for a few minutes, and she said she'd understand if you said no." Sarah turned out to be nothing like her mother or uncle. At 24, she had Lisa's eyes but none of her manipulative charm. She sat in my living room wringing her hands, clearly uncomfortable with the opulence but trying to be polite. "Grandma Anita," she began hesitantly, "I want to apologize for my family. Mom told me what happened, and I'm horrified by how you were treated." I studied her carefully, looking for signs of rehearsed manipulation or hidden agenda. "What exactly did your mother tell you?" Sarah's face flushed red. "She said you won the lottery and got greedy, that you abandoned the family over money. But I knew that couldn't be the whole story, so I called some people and found out the truth about how Uncle Damon and Aunt Callia treated you." "And what do you think about that truth?" I asked quietly. Tears welled up in Sarah's eyes. "I think they're horrible people who took advantage of your kindness and then acted surprised when you finally stood up for yourself. I think Mom is just as bad for trying to guilt you into fixing everyone's financial problems instead of addressing the real issue." Her honesty was refreshing and unexpected. "What brings you here, Sarah? What do you want from me?" "Nothing," she said quickly, then paused. "Well, that's not true. I want a relationship with my grandmother, but only if you want one too. I want to know you as a person, not as a source of family drama or financial assistance." She pulled out her phone and showed me photos from her job as a kindergarten teacher. I wanted to share this with someone in my family who might actually care. I got Teacher of the Year at my school, and when I told Mom, she just said, "That's nice," and then started talking about her credit card bills. We spent 3 hours together that afternoon, talking about her work, her struggles paying off student loans, her boyfriend who was studying to be a nurse. She asked about my life, my interests, my feelings about everything that had happened. She listened when I told her about Robert, about the loneliness of living in Damon's house, about the joy of finally having my own space again. When she left, she hugged me tightly and said, "I'd like to visit again next week if that's okay. Not because I want anything from you, but because I've missed having a grandmother." That night, I sat in my garden as the sun set over the city, feeling something I hadn't experienced in years. Hope for genuine family connection. Not with people who needed my money or felt guilty about their treatment of me, but with someone who valued me simply for who I was. Sarah has visited every week since then. She brings her students' artwork to show me, helps me plant flowers, listens to stories about her grandfather Robert. Last week, she brought her boyfriend to meet me, not because she felt obligated to include me in her life, but because she wanted to share something important with someone she cared about. This morning, as I sit in my library with a cup of Earl Grey and a book of poetry Robert gave me 40 years ago, I realize something profound. I didn't lose a family when I walked away from that toxic situation. I gained the opportunity to discover what real family actually looks like. Real family doesn't make you apologize for existing. Real family doesn't treat your needs as inconveniences. Real family doesn't crop you out of photos or discuss your disposal when you become elderly. Real family chooses you every day, just as you choose them. I have that now with Maria, who brings me soup when I'm not feeling well. With Rebecca, who remembers that I prefer daffodils to roses. With Eleanor and the Bridge Club, who include me in their plans because they enjoy my company. With Sarah, who sees me as a person worth knowing rather than a problem to be managed. And every morning when I wake up in this beautiful house, in this life I've built from the ashes of their rejection, I feel something I never thought I'd experience again. Gratitude for growing older. Not because age brings wisdom or patience or any of those comforting platitudes people offer, but because age, combined with resources and self-respect, brings the power to say no to unacceptable treatment and yes to genuine love. I won $57 million in the lottery. But the real prize wasn't the money. The real prize was learning that I deserved better than I'd been accepting and finally having the strength to claim it. The test is over. I passed. And my real life has finally begun. Now I'm curious about you who listen to my story. What would you do if you were in my place? Have you ever been through something similar? Comment below. And meanwhile, I'm leaving on the final screen 2 other stories that are channel favorites, and they will definitely surprise you. Thank you for watching until here.